welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here, we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Situate yourself.
Get sat.
Get all nice and comfy, cozy. We have our teas.
Yes.
How is the tea, by the way?
It's delicious.
Yeah.
It's absolutely delicious.
I'm used to brewing that kind like in ceremony.
Yeah.
So whenever I do it just like more casually, I'm like, how
does this taste just in a cup?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's delicious.
Good.
I taste it a lot. I don't know how to describe it. But you know, after you swallow and you take that first deep breath in, it's just kind of like hanging in your mouth. That's where I like get the taste.
Deeper taste.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That tea is definitely like that.
Yeah, I like it. It's delicious.
It's a red tea for anyone curious.
Anybody who wants to know.
Okay. Renee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here. So for a little background, Renee and I met, I want to say like almost a year ago.
About a year ago. I was trying to like
Me too.
recall back. And I remember it being incredibly warm that day. So it must have been, I feel like it was early June.
I think so too, because it was one of the first few months I was like fully in New York, which was June. So that's the earliest it could have been. We met sometime almost a year ago at a gathering that this business, Everyday Magic, was hosting in their new, at the time, home. And Everyday Magic is a crystal tarot business. Wonderful girls. Highly recommend looking them up. Love them. And we just bonded. And then I drove you to your car.
Yeah, because I walked like a mile and a half away.
You parked far away. And obviously we bonded over tarot and astrology and crystals. And then I think as we got to know each other more, it became even more about nature and herbalism and just like, I don't know, the way we see the world and how we interact with the world. Yeah. And so that, you think you were one of my first friends here.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah. And it was beautiful and also so enraging for me because that was only a few months after I moved away from the Hudson Valley and moved an hour and a half north. I was like, are you kidding me? One of my first new friends after moving, and I don't even live here anymore.
I know. I was like, I want to hang out with you, but you live like an hour and a half away.
The next two times we saw each other, we're on Google Maps trying to find anything that we could do relatively in the middle. But at this point, whatever.
I know. This is having friends as adults, making new friends. It takes a little bit of extra effort to like navigate schedules and locations and all the different things when you're not just making friends at school. Yeah,
but honestly, I see you more than I see my friends who I do live close to.
I mean, it's about making the decision to make the time.
Sometime in the near future, you definitely have to venture up because I'm right at the like foothills of the Adirondacks, and it's so beautiful. That access, I feel really similarly here in the Catskills, just that access to nature, and I don't know how to say, like more raw nature. Like this is just how it is. The trees aren't just so clearly cut, amazing lawns, everything's manicured. It is so much more natural that is elevated and it's seen as beautiful, and everybody in the community wants to uphold that. They don't want to be anything different. They want to be the Catskills. They want to be the Adirondacks. And that's actually genuinely something that I love about New York State in general.
Yeah, which I did not know about or appreciate when I was growing up in New York. But being here, and especially since I've moved here, I'm like 20 minutes away from Minnewaska State Park. Oh my God, I'm like almost to tears every time I'm there because I'm like, this is so close to me. It's crazy. It's such a gift. Anyway, Renee and I we talk about many things, but we were talking recently about how she's just transitioning out of her Saturn return, and I'm transitioning into my Saturn return because Saturn just moved from Pisces to Aries. So I wanted to bring Renee on. We'll see where the conversation goes. We'll talk about whatever, but I wanted to kind of unpack and process and discuss her Saturn return, some lessons she had, just what that was like for you.
Absolutely.
But before we get into that, first question, what is something that you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
I thought so long and hard about this. I turned to my husband, I was like, what do people don't know about me? Because I really feel like I wear so much on my sleeve and on my face. I've learned that I share, I'm a chronic oversharer, chronic yapper. I also have learned that I do a lot of probably my most profound learning and healing when I'm talking about it and talking about something. And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like I have no idea what people don't know about me. But after I was thinking about it, I realized it's that duality for me. I'm a very relatively happy, bubbly person. I can talk to pretty much anyone. Not that I necessarily want to, but I can. And I think it's the fact that I go very, very deep inside. I'm incredibly emotional, but I love creepy, morbid, hidden things, which astrologically speaking makes so much sense because my Venus is in the 8th house of death, taboo, transformation. And then my Jupiter is in the 12th house of hidden bad things. So it makes so much sense. One of probably my favorite classes that I took in college was mortuary archaeology.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Where all we did, every class was analyze different death rituals and death rites. And it sounds so morbid.
No, it sounds so cool.
But what it's all about is really learning about how their perspective on life. It's so much less about death, and it's so much more about the meaning of life and the meaning of our relationships and our community ties to each other. So I think for me, that's what I find so interesting. And I don't think a lot of people would expect that from me, that I love to go deep and talk about the really yucky, icky, sticky things, because I think it reveals the most truth about our values.
I can relate, being a Scorpio rising. That doesn't necessarily surprise me because I think I have that mindset as well. But I totally understand. And I think that often when people are more talkative naturally, it can seem like that outward expression is just everything that's going on for them.
Yeah.
But there's still so much happening internally. That reminds me of a course. When I was living in Hawaii, I did this death doula course and I loved it. And honestly, I feel like it's something that should be woven into our everyday curriculum, when we're even in middle school, but definitely high school, learning how to approach death and when someone's passing. I mean, not everyone has to go so deep as to be someone's support system, but at least knowing how to feel more comfortable and at ease with that.
When I came back to the US after living in Morocco for 2 years, had no idea what I wanted to do. And I, for a while, considered learning to be a death doula. So I think that's really funny that you mentioned the death doula aspect, but sometimes I come back to that, well, what if? But with this idea of adding it and weaving it into our curriculum, what I really connect with that is, at least recently in nonprofit and human services, even in state procedure, there's this shift into being more trauma informed. And I think that's so much of what you're talking about, is how can we be more trauma informed, which really, if you want to take away the very technical aspect of that, it's being empathetic to somebody who's going through the toughest time in their life. And just how can we do more of that, which I think is so interesting on this whole wider socio-political spectrum of where we see everybody going, and this wrestling with individually, I do believe that people feel so much empathy. But it's that connection of, but who am I supposed to feel empathetic for? And also the fear of feeling empathy for somebody that you don't know, that perhaps you don't know if they would feel empathy for you. And I think that's just like people then building these internalized boundaries for safety and to not feel vulnerable. I know both you and I know and can understand there's so much strength in vulnerability and sharing, supporting each other in our vulnerability that I completely agree. I wish we had more conversations. I wish we didn't see all of these aspects of our life that quite literally everybody's going to navigate as we don't talk about this, or we shouldn't learn about this or help somebody through. Because then when it comes around to experiencing it, you don't know how to ask for help. Nobody around you knows how to provide that help. And then you just become isolated.
Exactly. And you don't even know what it is you want or need because you haven't been given the space to figure that out. You haven't been given the opportunity to even know what the options could be, whether that's with death or whether you're just dealing with something challenging in your life. We're just taught to suck it up and move on.
And that's something that I love so much that you talk about is ritualizing life. And my husband asked me the other day, he's like, well, what's a ritual? And keep in mind, like, a lot of this is because of the language barrier. Like he's learning
from Morocco.
Exactly. So what is it? Fourth language is English. What I described it though is, yes, a ceremony, but it's a process of engaging transition so that we can really embody a transition. And when we're able to embody a transition, then at least in one aspect, I think we are protected against experiencing trauma. And big T, little t, whatever type, you know, we're able to process and move through this transition fully embodied and walk in that next phase of our life. Supported, clear-headed, confident, right? And I think that's connected so much with studying all of these death rituals because that is like one of the most important transitions that living people are going to make. And I think it's beautiful, of course, then in some cultures, there's that aspect of that transition for the person who is crossing over into that next phase of their death life process too. So I think there's a lot of power in that ritualizing, honestly, any transformation process, transition moment in our life. And if we engage more in that, perhaps we're able to handle the big T's traumas a bit better, the bigger transitions that will impact us for the rest of our lives.
I really love that. And ritual is what allows us to be present with our life so we're not so afraid of it. Yeah. I think one reason we're so afraid of death is because we're so afraid of our life.
Yes.
And if we actually take the time to ritualize our life, be intentional with our life, be present with our life, and be present with ourselves and understand ourselves through that, then we're not living in a state of avoidance. And I think that avoidance is what halts the processing process and therefore halts the ability to move through difficult situations, which then leads to trauma.
Absolutely. I think of it in a herbalist perspective too. I'm currently in the evolutionary herbalism vitalist practitioner course, and something that my teacher Seja Popham always says is chronic suppression of acute symptoms leads to chronic illness. And that's so true in our physical health, but also our emotional health, also our mental health, our spiritual health. Also, if we're just suppressing everything, it's going to become chronic and it's going to traumatize our bodies and our minds and our souls. And so we need those opportunities to parse through that, to process, and like we always say, embody the transition, because it's not meant to break us down.
Exactly. And people wonder why we're seeing chronic pain and chronic illness pop up so much more. I think it's because there are certain generations that were taught to suppress.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not to feel and not to express. And like you said, that's what leads to chronic illness.
Yeah.
So I think a lot would be healed if we just talked more.
I know.
And used ritual to be more present and process and feel and all the things.
all the things.
Which kind of speaks to what we're doing today, because taking time to have conversations, whether or not you're on a podcast, but just getting with someone that you're close to or comfortable with and talking about your experiences, what helps you integrate and embody and move through it all. So
absolutely.
Let's talk about your Saturn return, girl.
Let's do it. Oh my gosh. So let me pull up my literal timeline that I wrote. Yes, I have notes. My natal Saturn's in Pisces in my 4th house. So I'll start with saying I'm a Gemini sun, Scorpio moon, Sagittarius rising, which is like, I would argue, a little bit of chaotic interestingness.
Yeah, for those who don't know, what does that mean to you? Maybe just key points or associations with each thing for you personally.
Yeah, what I found so interesting was my personal point of identification for so long. I struggled with this idea of a Gemini sun. I think part of that was this social idea that Geminis are super two-faced. And I actually just recently saw a video online of Angelina Jolie talking about Gemini. She was like, it's not that we have 2 faces, we have 20,000 faces. We're multifaceted. And I'm like, yes.
That's so funny.
But when I learned of moon signs, and I found I was a Scorpio moon, and I was like, hell yeah. I was so into it. I felt so connected to that. And I now understand, because of that interest and yearning for, I guess, kind of like a dark side of the underbelly of things, I was able to understand my Gemini sun in terms of my ability to communicate, my ability to be a sort of chameleon in situations. I loved traveling. I was able to learn different languages quickly. And so these were just small sort of things in my life that I'm like, oh, I'm kind of good at that. But I was also social butterfly. I had a lot of friends, but not many really, really close friends. I had like 2 or 3 sort of situation, which I think is fantastic. And then with my Sagittarius rising, that I think has been something that I've questioned so much. How do I fit into this Sagittarius rising? Or how does this fit into me? And I think, though, that's where a lot of my aspirations come from, of me reaching out, which makes sense, I would say, with this rising sign. I think then also just with the symbolism, with the visual symbolism, a rising, you're going up, and Sagittarius is the archer with the arrow. So I think for me, it was so much of like ascending, moving forward, moving through, that I really learned. And eventually I came to understand Sagittarius is, one, ruled by Jupiter, but is this sign of philosophy, of learning, of travel. So for me, that's really how I've been able to understand my big 3 in that way, of how I reach out into the world. And then my sun being how I'm identified. And then my moon, how I identify myself. That's really been that kind of triplet of my life. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's helpful because, one, not everyone knows that much about astrology. And 2, I think that our interpretation or our embodiment of our chart, this is so true for human design as well, is going to be so unique. And I think it's why pop astrology can be so deceiving for people, especially who don't know that much, because we are not our sun signs. You know, we are the totality of our chart. And even within that, that is going to take on a certain flavor when it's mixed into our being and our essence. So I like to hear other people explain their interpretation, their expression of their chart. So.
Yeah. I think also with so many things, astrology is in a way best understood in retrospect, where we can really reflect on what we've been through and how these archetypes match up with our lives. And it's all about patterns and finding patterns, identifying patterns. So there's, of course, that prediction aspect it all, if you want to call it that, but it's really just pattern recognition. And so I think that's what's really interesting with astrology, is the further away sometimes we get from a certain transit of a planet in the sky, we can say, oh yeah, that really links up well, and I really felt that. Whereas when you're in it, you're just in it. You're thinking about your life. You're not sitting there thinking about the sky. I mean, some of us are, but the reality is if we're just thinking about something else and letting something else make decisions for us, then we're not really being present. So then it's like you have the day after where you're like, oh man, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think it can be dangerous to get too attached to the present moment transits and like the horoscopes predicting the future, because then you get so caught up in that versus being present and just trusting yourself and like how you need to show up in this moment. And also it speaks so much to, it can be hard to know who we are or what phase of life we're in right now. Sometimes we can only know because we have what we've learned from the past.
Exactly.
And that's why I think reflecting and understanding and processing our past is so important, because it helps us understand the present, like how we want to move forward now. And without that, we're just lost in it all.
Yeah. And I think, at least for me with this transit through Saturn and Pisces, I didn't see any of these dots being connected. Like there were some things where I'm like, yeah, that's super relevant to Saturn and Pisces, or yeah, I can super feel this constriction sort of thing. But it wasn't until I started to literally write things down and I noticed when the transit started and when it ended and this and that, I was like, oh wow, what was this theme? What aspects did I build throughout this period in my life that I can sit there and say, I learned something. And I think that's really what Saturn is so much about, is this structure, boundary, limits, blah, 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 constriction. But I think what Saturn for me really did was it was formation. It was form building. And especially in Pisces, where it's this water sign, mutable sign, there were no boundaries, right? Everything was everywhere, but water only takes shape if it's in a vessel. And for me, that's really what this transit was about, was creating the vessel so I could have this experience, but also the porosity. I can make so many freaking water metaphors right now, like the osmosis of it. But that's really kind of how it felt. For me, what I thought actually was pretty crazy that I literally did not think about until my drive down here. I was thinking about every single piece. I'm like, well, yeah, so the fourth house, the house of like home life, and what could this have really been? But then I realized the beginning of the end, the real beginning of the end for my previous job, I was working at a company with the word home in it. Interesting. Literally. And I was going into people's home. Worked in human services. My majority of my professional career has been in domestic violence, human trafficking advocacy, as well as child welfare. So there was, all of a sudden, I was faced with the way this transit really began for me was the porosity of my own boundaries between work and home life. So I really struggled with any type of boundary setting. I would work 14-hour days and I would put everything that my job had before myself. That like I shudder thinking about it. But no wonder I burnt out. When I moved on from that, I immediately understood I can never put myself in that position again. And so that was like that one formation of boundary right there. And it was learning that I had to set the boundaries. That the boundaries are more about my behavior and less about anybody else. It was abrupt too. I was not looking for a new job. In reality, I was expecting to actually be promoted, which would have only made everything of these like lackadaisical, non-existent boundaries even worse. But I had this person come in to the job. I literally think it was like 2 months after my Saturn return started. Yeah. Immediately we're butting heads. Immediately. We did not get along. There was a lot of gossip, a lot of frustration, anger, and then that became resentment, and that became a weird sort of boundary setting of like, don't come into my office and you can't speak to my staff. And it was really uncomfortable, and it felt so inauthentic to who I am and to how I wanted to be a supervisor, the team that I wanted, the office culture I wanted. It threw it all for a loop. And eventually I had a conversation with my bosses who for, at that time, almost a year, were saying, yeah, you're going to be directing the entire office. You're going to be the county director. And so I was de facto the county director for my team, but I didn't get the pay. I didn't actually get the title, and I just got all the work. So all of a sudden, I have this conversation because my adversary in the office started joining these county director meetings. And I was thinking to myself, like, what the heck? So I had the conversation with my supervisors. I was like, what's my future here? How do you see me? I see that you're elevating this other individual, which is fine, but you're doing this in the places where you've been telling me something. Are you telling us two different things? What is actually happening? And eventually I decided for them. I was like, I guess I'm going to go. And so thank goodness that sort of phase resolved itself, because now I'm in a job where my time is 100% respected. I can take time off without feeling guilty. I'm not working the crazy hours, but I'm also not giving so much of myself to my job where I don't have an identity. That was the biggest shift for me, was all of a sudden I could give myself to my hobbies, my interests again. I started to read. Something so simple, reading. But at that time, I hadn't read a book in years. I did not have the time. I didn't have the energy when I did have the time. Yeah, it was a lot.
What do you think spurred you to be immersed in that kind of energy in the first place? I know myself, and there's one thing I'm pretty good at that I can say confidently. I do feel like I'm good at boundaries, and especially in certain ways. Like, I would not find myself in that situation. So I'm curious, what was it in you that you think was drawn to that, to being so consumed by work that you were separated from your identity?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. So I think anybody who works in the human services field, I think, would probably have a similar answer, even if they didn't realize it. That is the human services culture. 100%. It is, you give yourself and your entire self to your job because it is so much bigger than you. This is so much more important. The health of our communities, the health of the mission, like all of it. It was expected. And even I would hear my supervisor say, like, well, we need service-oriented workers. And if you ask for more money, or if you ask for time off, you are not being service-oriented. And how dare you not answer your phone call when a family is in crisis? You know, that was that culture, but it's the entire culture, I think, of human services. Additionally, I'll pause and kind of back up. When I was a Peace Corps volunteer, the training is, you're not assigned to a job, you're assigned to a community. And you're living your work.
Wow.
So you go through 3 months of daily training, living with the host family, which is amazing. And I loved my experience there. I had some of the hardest experiences and some of the most amazing experiences. But I'd be remiss to say that it wasn't damaging training to have. You're being trained to let go of your entire personality, of all the boundaries that you're expected to have, to integrate into this community. All of a sudden, when your work is eating, it's sleeping, it's the relationships you make, it's whether or not are you a good volunteer, quote unquote. If you travel somewhere else because you want to, no, you should stay there and build better relationships. So I had years of this training and reinforcement throughout the 2 years to live my work. And then you come back and that's what you're going to do. Like, at that point, I was trained to do this. And so in that general sense, getting my degrees in the field, I was truly trained. I fully believe I was built to be a service worker, which is amazing for so many people. And at the same time, that lack of boundaries is only damaging. It's only going to do harm. And not just to the person who has the lack of boundaries, but to the people that they're serving as well. Because it fosters this idea of depending upon the service and upon the service giver in a way. And then when that person can no longer provide, they're just sort of like tossed to the side. And then the classic culture of work that we have just replace them. So I think that's definitely what I would say guided me into that position. And just thank goodness that I was in the place in my life that I was able to recognize that and choose, I can't do this. And I think that's really what that lesson of Saturn is giving, because that's how I did work. That's how I did all of these things. And then for this Saturn transit, it demands attention. It demands that you pay attention to this. If you don't like the boundaries or the constriction, that's what that is going to feel like. Either you can choose this and have this agency and authority on how the boundaries are going to be set, or they're going to be thrust upon you and you might not like it. So I think I was very grateful, and I still am, to have been in the position where I was able to choose.
No, that's so powerful. And I think that lesson can be applied in so many different areas of life for different people, because I think our culture, our society, especially when it comes to work, teaches us that there's so much more important than our identity, so much more important than our joy, our desires, knowing ourselves, being happy, being fulfilled, being at ease. It's like, no, you work and you serve and you do, you produce, you whatever, and that's it. And yeah, if you feel happy, great. Yeah. Like if you feel rested, okay.
Well, you just think of it. There's the phrase of like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I'm sorry. There's always going to be things, whether it's regarding my job, regarding my personal life, anything that I just don't like doing. And when I sit there, and anybody would sit there and say, yeah, it feels like work. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
You have to work for your life. You have to set up your bank accounts. You have to make sure that you get your groceries and you eat. Like, there's non-negotiables in life, and that's perfectly fine. We don't have to glorify and say, oh, if you just love a little harder, then everything's going to be fine. It's, I think, setting a lot of folks up for disappointment, because they expect to arrive at joy. They expect to arrive at ease and satisfaction, rather than finding it constantly every day through, like we've been saying, being actually present in our lives.
100%. It takes me a lot of effort to be happy sometimes. Yeah. It just is hard for me for many different reasons. And so I have to decide, I have to commit to it. And this is one reason why ritualizing everyday life is so important to me, because without those rituals, I forget to be happy. And I love what I do. And more every day, I'm shifting my job to be what I love and what I'm so devoted to. It's freaking hard. No matter what, things that are worthwhile don't come easy.
I think there's the watering down of the actual emotion of love and the actual emotions of joy and happiness and satisfaction. What does that all mean? And then you end up internalizing it and feeling like, what's wrong with me that I just can't feel this way all the time? Our lives are interacting with so many other people in so many different ways. It's unrealistic to expect us to be happy and joyful all the time. And if we were to feel that way, I always think of this. Did you watch the show The Good Place?
I did, yes.
So that's how it is. Like when they finally get to the good place and everybody's brains is mush and there's no meaning, there's nothing in life. They're like, please, you gotta stop this. And all of a sudden, impermanence provides people with motivation, with joy, for opportunity to feel. And that work is what also just makes us.
Speaking of impermanence, that's why I think it's so important to talk about death, because then we know how valuable life is. And also, so many of us we've watered down joy, we've watered down love because we're not actually feeling it. We're just saying it. We're just saying, oh, I'm good. Oh, I'm happy. But we're not actually pausing and being like, how am I?
Yeah.
You know? And now I ask myself how I am all the time. And I'm never feeling just one way. Like, I'm never just happy. I'm never like just good. Someone asks me how I am and I'm like, how long do you have?
Yeah.
Like, that is not an easy question. And that's because I have taken the time to be present and actually know how I am and what I'm feeling. But if we're just running around our day or like taught to just, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
This is how it feels to be good. Then we just say we're good and we actually don't know what that means.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend recently about this concept of connection. And I was saying how attention is equal to connection. And when we're able to pay attention and to attend to something, to somebody, that's what we're connecting to, and we're present in that moment. It's connected to that concept of we don't just arrive. It doesn't just fall from the sky and arrive and stay permanent like this. Even the things that we think are the most permanent aren't. They degrade, they change, they grow. Like mountains are still growing and degrading. Water is cutting, a river is always changing. That's just life. And when we're able to connect and attend to that change and pay attention to whatever is in front of us, we can actually emotionally connect and spiritually connect. I think of like just in general of relationships, and everybody wants like the most perfect relationship, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of work to maintain. It's a lot of personal work. Like nobody knows what's going on in somebody else's brain. That's where all sense of conflict arises. And it's work to maintain happiness. It's work to maintain positivity. It doesn't mean that it's bad work.
It's work that's worth it.
Yeah.
You have to choose the work that's worth it. That's the whole thing.
And that's where I think it's important to, as you're saying, to pay attention and to connect with yourself so you can actually understand, how am I feeling in this moment? What does this make me feel like? What does that make me feel like? So I can attend and then I can choose. If I just ignored this, life was going to choose for me.
Right.
And I don't even, like, who knows how it could have chosen? Was I going to get ill? Was I going to be hurt? Was I going to mess up at my job, cause something awful to happen and lose it? We don't know. But I was able to attend to what I was feeling. Thankfully, I was able to see a lot of warning signs. I was struggling with my relationships. I was struggling with my health. I was feeling really frustrated. Like, why are I not happy? I thought this was what I wanted. I thought that was what I wanted. And all of a sudden it was like, whoa, pause, stop. You need to make a new decision. And like I said, thank goodness I was able to actually notice that and see all those warning signs, because if I didn't, I know that I would be even more unhappy.
Oh, absolutely. What's next on your
Yes. Oh my gosh.
list?
So this is a big one. And this was kind of like in the midst of my work stuff, but I also, in August, September through like November and December of 2023, in August, my husband and I traveled back to Morocco, and that was his first time seeing his family in 2 years since immigrating to the US. My first time being back to Morocco in 3 years. And we experienced like a devastating earthquake. It was horrifying. And like I said, devastating. Thousands of people died. Upon even more, thousands of people have lost their homes. They're still not rebuilt. It was catastrophic for many, many small mountain communities. And we were just on a 2-week vacation. So we had to grapple with that. We were sleeping on the side of a road underneath some olive trees for a couple days with some of our family. And then we left and we went back to normal life and everything was supposed to be fine. I did not feel fine. My husband did not feel fine. It wasn't like until weeks later, we were able to say in the moment, we feel so bad that we're leaving. But then like 1 month passes, 2 months pass, and you're still not feeling right. I was still like randomly crying. My mind was chaotic. And I don't even know how this came about really, but I finally was able to realize I was experiencing survivor's guilt. And I just was overcome with feeling so guilty. I just having existential questions of like, who the hell am I? What did I do to deserve this and that? And I should give everything away. And why should like concepts of deserving and worthiness and everything bubbled up. And so that was just emotionally a really tough time that I think since then has really informed and I don't want to say solidified, but reinforced my feelings of worthiness. I think it was a door opening to my idea of like personal worthiness. Just because you survived or were able to leave that physical place or emotional place behind doesn't mean that you're not worthy of feeling joy now. Joy is everywhere all the time. And also this idea of abundance, such a opposite feeling, but this idea of abundance. And if I truly believe that I live in an abundant world, it's not necessarily the question of why me, it's more the question of, well, why not me? Like, it's not everybody just point blank is born worthy. We are all worthy. There's no hierarchy of worthiness. There's no prioritizing worthiness. We are worthy. And so the question is, why am I blocking myself from feeling that? My joy doesn't take away from anybody else's joy. And you can put any bit of positive feeling or emotion and also anybody else's negative emotion. It doesn't take away. Me feeling sad and guilty doesn't take it away from somebody else. That's not a two-way street. And I think that was really, really powerful for me that I've really only been able to further develop through the rest of that 2.5-year transit that I feel so much more confident in only now.
Oh my God, I got chills when you were talking about that because that's been something that I've really had to come to terms with, which is, and I think it's so easy in our world today where I am so painfully aware of my privilege.
Yeah.
And how lucky I am to be in the position I am. And that can lead to me feeling a lot of guilt and shame and turning against myself. And that doesn't do anyone any good. And I feel like I've spent so long punishing myself for being privileged.
Yeah.
And blocking my joy and the abundance in my life because of that.
Yeah.
When in actuality, it only serves the world more for me to take the privilege that I have been blessed with and go out and be happy and do what I can from that empowered place.
Yes.
And when we can use the abundance that we have been given to elevate our life, to feel joy, to nourish ourselves, to support ourselves, we then can fully tap into who we are and go out into the world in that fullness and have the impact on the world we're meant to have.
Yeah.
Versus if we use it to shame ourselves and blame ourselves and harm ourselves, we just shut down and we turn away from the world.
Yeah.
And then no one's benefiting. We're not helping anyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think just everything you said has been such a key point for me. And you said it beautifully. I couldn't agree more. We're such mirrors of the environments around us. And that's also part of that choice that we have of remaining present and leaning into gratitude, I think, because the more you look around and you're judging yourself in this place of shame, the more you're gonna see things to judge and shame upon others. And the more then they're going to do to you. But when we can lean into this space of gratitude, we're able to shift that idea. And then all of a sudden we are seeing more beauty in the world around us. We know both sides exist. And when we get over that hump of living and in this shame, in this guilt, in this, well, I was born in this place of privilege, and so now I have to somehow undercut myself because I decided that I'm not deserving. Everybody's deserving. So you can utilize every resource that you have to uplift everybody else. And you're only going to learn more. Like, community is only going to build. Yeah. That's where we also shift that idea of it's all about me, or this individual idea, into a more collective community filled space where we're relying on our community for things that we know that we might have. And it's not in a place of shaming ourselves, of judging ourselves. It's just a place of acknowledgement and choosing to say, oh, this is so exciting. I get to find a new friend. I get to ask my friend for help. I get to connect with them. That's the point. It was interesting times.
Wow.
The past 2 years has then also been riddled with moving. I've moved every single year for the past 7 years.
Wow.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm never moving ever again, as I say, renting on a yearly lease. One thing that was kind of funny is I've been able to track each place I've moved physically further away from a family member, which I think was so needed. I love my family so much. And at the same time, I think there was a lot of enmeshment going on. Growing up, I very much felt like I had to attend to the emotional needs of my family and of my household. And that meant that then I would have outbursts of myself because I wasn't attending to them, and I never learned how to communicate what I needed and had them attended to without like screaming or crying. So that's been like a journey that I'm on, is how can I actually attend to my own needs and request attention to my needs without having an outburst, without suppressing until something bursts out. And I think kind of tracking how I've literally moved. I moved from my parents' house. That was crazy, a couple years. Being an adult, living with your parents, and then your new spouse.
Oh God.
2 out of 10 don't recommend. But then it's like we moved 20 minutes away. And then we moved upstate, which one would think would be very far. No, I was 4 minutes away from my sister. So I was doing laundry at her house every week, sort of thing. And then we moved just 15 minutes, but technically to a different town. And it's just been this kind of process of actually feeling far more independent, sustainable, and able to decide how I spend my time, how I go about my weeks or my days on my own, and not having to rely on my family or say, no, we're going to do this instead. And my husband, honestly, has been such a big key factor, at least me personally, in growing, because he's always been like, well, if you don't want to do it, then don't do it.
Yeah.
Which I don't know the time of his birth, but I did learn that he also is a manifesting generator, which I'm like, this makes so much sense. And he's always been the king of saying, I'm never going to do anything that I don't want to do, which was the total opposite for me, which I think is so interesting when it's like we are the same type, but total different experiences.
Yeah. Well,
and that goes
type
through
and like really personality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have to consider just like everything else, that whether it's in a human design chart, astrological natal chart, and just life experience. Like just because you have a similarity doesn't mean that it manifests similarly.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, that's been such a point of growth for me, of choosing what I want to do myself in relation to my family, and not feeling guilty or feeling like I'm not living up to an expectation or to what people know me to be. I think it's so interesting also, I'll note, the Saturn return starts right after your frontal lobe develops. I think there's some purpose to that.
Yeah.
I don't think we would be capable of having a Saturn return unless our frontal lobe was developed. So thank you,
like,
creator.
You're a full person, you're ready now.
Exactly. And it's like, here's big test.
Yeah.
Try it out.
Tell me if there are any key moments that you want to discuss still, and then maybe core reflection points and where that leaves you now.
Yeah, I would say I don't have any other very specific events. Just my biggest reflection is, especially for somebody going into their Saturn return.
Give me your wisdom.
Yes. And I said it earlier, like just being able to make the choice yourself, being present and connecting with yourself so that you know when to set a boundary or when to, as I said, create a formation, create a line in the sand. For those who are very like water-based, very emotional people, have that containment so that you can hold space for something, not suppress it, just hold space for it. I think that's my biggest reflection, because you're going to move through it. Mm-hmm. It's just a transit. It's just some moment in your life, and it's not your whole life. And I think that's really powerful when you're able to get some perspective on that, because then you're able to say, oh, well, I get to choose how this affects me, and I get to choose what I want to do with this now, and transmute that rather than necessarily like changed by it.
That's so powerful. And I think the container piece is so important, because it gives us the ability to flow and be more present and to feel safe in our flow.
Yeah.
Versus without the container, we're just
everywhere.
chaos.
We got to be mopped up off the floor.
Exactly.
And then it's like, I didn't want to be in a mop bucket.
Yeah. Like, I didn't want to move over there. Like, I wanted to stay with the stream. You know?
Exactly.
And having a container for the freedom of our flow is what brings it safety.
Absolutely. Literally every form of water we see is going to be in some container, and when it's not, like we see raindrops, just exactly like storms, rivers have containers, they have banks, they have the sediment on the ground. Oceans have containers, everything has container, but when we don't, we go splat on the ground and we evaporate. And so there's so much power in how we can create that container, make that formation, so that we can actually push forward and direct our energy to where we want it to go, which might be moving forward with that river analogy. It might be the path of least resistance, but as we know, like water still, yeah, we can shape the rocks, we can shape the mountains, we can create canyons. It doesn't mean that too is permanent. We can change it. I think just the agency and empowerment that it provides is so important. And at this age now, and having completed the Saturn return, and granted, Saturn is going to go retrograde in a couple months, so I'll feel the transit again, but I think that's just like more reinforcement.
Yeah, I think it'll just be more reflecting.
Exactly, more reflecting, more opportunity for reinforcement, and more opportunities to decide, how am I going to move forward in this? Exactly. And it's just like activating. That's what I think there's a lot in, we were saying, like in pop astrology, there's this terror. Oh my God, your Saturn return. And yeah, I'm not going to say that people don't experience crazy heavy natal Saturn transits. Yeah. And at the same time, it's an experience. We not everybody is going to have that. Living to tell the tale, it was heavy and I learned so much. And at the same time, like I look back, I'm like, yeah, well, I was able to handle it. Perhaps that was because I was aware I was going through my Saturn return. So I was able to be like, how can I handle these hard things in my life?
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, whether or not you know it's a Saturn return or you care about astrology, I think that just speaks to being present with your life. Yeah. And showing up for your life and showing up for yourself and being like, I can handle this. What is this teaching me? I personally am not afraid of my Saturn return. Yeah. I'm like, bring it on. I'm ready. I already, even if I didn't know about my Saturn return, I intuitively feel like the next 3 years are going to bring a lot of change for me in the way that I'm really excited about. Yeah. You know, and I know it's going to be challenging, but I'm like, I've been working for these changes for a very long time, so I'm ready. Exactly.
Saturn isn't a destructing force. It's formation. It's building structure. So that quite literally just says that perhaps this transit in your life is going to activate how you set forward, how you're going to do this.
Yes, because Saturn's, it's not here to be like, I'm going to break you down and ruin you. It's like, I'm going to teach you the lessons you need to be your best self, to be your fullest self, to walk your path.
Absolutely. And it's like, Saturn's been like sky daddy. Like it's that authority figure in our life. And it's something that we should be able to look to depend on. Like we need walls so we can rest on them, so we can rest, you know? And that's, I think, when we're able to not be so terrified because the Cosmo article said that everybody has like disrupting life events through their Saturn returns. Okay, yeah, and also you will make it through.
Yeah.
Like you absolutely will.
Okay, with that being said, what is an intention you want to set for yourself for moving forward after all you have learned?
Yeah. I would say, let me think for a minute. I would say my intention is that I will trust how I feel, and I would say just that. I will trust how I feel. I trust my voice. I trust my authority to steward my life. I will trust how I feel.
I love that. Do you want to share with everyone where they can connect with you, find you, anything?
Yes, as similarly to you, but maybe on a different scale. I am growing and changing and evolving, so I'm so excited for what the next few months, at least to the next year, will bring. Right now, you can find me on Instagram and on TikTok. Instagram, my handle is page.ofthepriestess. And on TikTok, it is Beldy Herb Co. Beldy Herb Co. will be my budding herbalism adventure. So yeah, there's a lot more to come. I'm starting to open a registration actually for my own manifestation group called the Alchemilla process. So bringing that aspect of transformation, alchemy, but also with herbalism. So yeah, big things are to come, but you can definitely find me at both of those places right now.
And everything will be linked below.
Yeah.
But that's so exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This was such a fun conversation.
So much fun.
I feel like we could have talked for hours.
Just scratch the surface.
I know, seriously. I was like, I want to go deeper on that.
Part 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.